People like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, if you watch my show regularly, you know that since March 20th, 2020, a little over 4 years ago, I have broadcast at least one show, sometimes as many as 6 shows a day, and I've done almost 2,100 shows now. It was my hope to make it at least 5 years and become the Cal Ripken, those of you that are young don't know who I'm talking about, of YouTube, and not break my streak. However, my publisher had other plans. You see, I have a new book coming out in a couple of months, and as I approach my 65th year of life, it's my dream to be a New York Times bestseller. And the only way to do that is to promote the book heavily before it comes out, because it's the pre-sales that really help this process happen. By the way, there's 3 links below if you'd like to purchase the book in advance and help me out. The first link, you can get a signed copy. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is my publisher has set me up for a whirlwind book tour where I will be traveling to many cities in the United States, including Mexico, to promote the book before it comes out, as well as doing almost 100 podcasts. If you have a podcast and would like to invite me on, please write help@chefaj.com or a blog if you'd like to help me promote the book. But anyway, because of this, I can't do a show every day and be in Mexico and in New Jersey and in Mendocino and all these places. Now, I'm not quitting YouTube. I love YouTube. I love my guests, and it's breaking my heart that I won't be seeing them every day for a while, but I'll be taking a hiatus for a couple of months. So this month, June of 2024, is the last month that I will be doing one live show every day, and we'll be ending on the 30th with a very special guest. If you'd like to know who the guests are in advance, just subscribe at chefaj.com. We send the schedule out every Sunday. So without further ado, please welcome today's guest, and he will be talking about growing for life. You have to figure out what that means. Hopefully not growing bigger, which unfortunately is a problem in America. He's one of the wonderful doctors at Love Life Telehealth. That's a place where you can actually get a consultation with a very knowledgeable doctor who is plant-based and understands what it's like to be plant-based and help you. He is board certified in a few different states. He'll tell you which ones. And his name is Dr. Jeff Pierce. Please welcome him back to the show. Hello, Dr. Pierce. I haven't seen you since last September, I think.
I think that's right. Thank you very much for the chance to be on your show, and love seeing you, AJ, and thank you again.
You're welcome. Well, I might be coming to Santa Rosa again soon, so we might have to see each other again. That was fun. We went to that. I went to see you speak at the Santa Rosa Veg Fest, as a matter of fact.
That's right. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
great. It was great to see you in the audience. And I sort of felt like I could just defer all questions to you, but you didn't let me do that.
Well,
So
I didn't heckle you, so that was no, not that I would do that. But anyway, so what people may not know about you, you're kind of like Dr. Ron Weiss. You're a doctor, you're a gardener, you're a doctor, you're a gardener.
that's right. Yeah, Ron is becoming a friend. He's got great stuff going on in New Jersey, but I'm over here in the West Coast. And yes, I'm a doctor. I'm a family doctor. For about 20 years now. Started my family medicine training in 2004. And then I became a lifestyle medicine doctor, and we'll talk more about that. But over the last 12 years, you can find me in the garden when I'm not at work. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Nice.
All right. So, yeah, today I have some slides kind of put together, and I'm going to go through a little bit of a journey, tell a little bit more about me, and then if you can think any questions, AJ, that you think your audience would like to know, we can chat about those. But I'm going to go ahead, and if now's a good time, I'm going to go ahead and
Yep.
share my screen. Yeah.
And if you guys have any questions, as always, place them in the chat. It's helpful if you start with 4 question marks so that I can differentiate easily a question from a comment.
All right. Okay, and it looks like AJ that we're seeing that first slide, gardening for life.
Yep. Grapes of 3 different colors.
That's right. So the one of the fun parts about making your own slideshows is you get to include, pictures of your family or pictures of your garden. And so pretty much all of these photos of produce and stuff came from our garden. Um, and here we go. So just a little bit more about my story from a gardening standpoint. I have not been gardening for all that long. I guess about 12 years or so since I met my wife and we started our lives together. I was the kind of guy who didn't know how to, keep a rock alive. Basically, I was not. Didn't have the green thumb, and besides growing some tomatoes and peppers for a year or two when we were kids. I didn't have any house plants or anything growing up that I was in charge of. It just wasn't on my radar. But when I met my wife, she said, "Okay, hey, we're starting our vegetable garden because that's what I do every year." And so, as all smart husbands do, I listened to her and started learning about it, and then really did a deep dive and fell in love with it. And it's really changed my life. I'm a different person by far today in many ways because of this aspect of the journey. So we're here in Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco. So a lot of my gardening will pertain to this climate. But we bought a house near downtown, and it's maybe a little bit above average size for a city plot, but it's still just a city plot, and we've decided to pack it full of edible um, plants. And so just to give you an idea, this is what it looked like 12 years ago when we moved in. There was a lot of Bermuda grass and wild things growing, and it had some veggie boxes that were in place, but they were just kind of taken over by weeds. And then this same shot about 10 years later looks like this. And we just started to plant vegetables and fruits. You can see a grape growing in the middle there and some let wild things be wild, like the fennel on the left. And here's another view of our property looking back at the house, and you can see the garage, the side of the garage on the left there. And 10 years later, it went from that to that as we moved more fruit trees in. And then here's a carport that was just kind of a general hangout area. And we decided to convert it to a little mini greenhouse, this little 8 by 10 kind of thing. Um, and as we'll talk about over the next, during this next hour, basically we've converted our property into a place to grow food, and that's been beneficial on many different levels. So if we're looking at gardening through a lifestyle medicine framework, what does that mean? Well, first of all, we should say, what is lifestyle medicine? I think a lot of people, Chef AJ, on your show are very familiar with what lifestyle medicine is. And, I trained as a family doc, very thankful for that. I still do some things that some family doctors do. I was on labor and delivery yesterday, helping teach residents at the bedside, delivering babies, doing C-sections, that kind of stuff. And then I stumbled upon something called lifestyle medicine, and it's pretty amazing, a newer field of medicine. But the idea is basically there's a lot of chronic illness out there in the United States and around the world. And modern medicine, even though we do a lot of things very well in modern medicine, we have not done a very great job at chronic illness. And part of the reason is that most of our focus, most of what we're really good at is pills and procedures, shots, things like this, surgeries. But when your chronic illness is very probably likely due to day in and day out changes that we make, a pill and procedure is not the best way to address it. It's really about getting to the root cause and addressing these changes, these decisions that we make day in and day out. And so if you think of a leaky faucet that's overrunning the sink, this is a classic example. I could pick up the mop every day and mop up what has leaked onto the floor. And maybe I can find a new fancy mop that just came out this year that works extra good, and then I only have to mop every other day. But basically, I'm still mopping the water that's overrunning every day. And so instead, lifestyle medicine says, hey, let's get to the faucet, turn off the faucet, get to the root cause of what the problem is, and then we don't have to mop every day. And so that's a very similar approach to what we do with high blood pressure and cholesterol and diabetes and overweight and dementia and some cancers and things like that. So um, lifestyle medicine works great for chronic illnesses. And one way to incorporate the 6 areas or the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine is through growing some of our own food. And so these are the 6 areas of lifestyle medicine with whole food nutrition, regular physical activity, restorative sleep, avoiding risky substances, positive social connection, and stress management. And I will show you how our family and others can incorporate gardening to help with all 6 of those pillars. And then let's not forget the amazing folks at the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute who said, yeah, those 6 pillars are great. Um, but then let's add 3 more to make a wellness wheel with 9 spokes. And those other 3 areas that they added were enjoying nature, having a sense of purpose, and finding joy. And all 3 of these things are incorporated into gardening life as well. So let's break them down to a whole food plant-based diet, right? So this could be a predominantly or an exclusively plant-based diet. And when we say whole food plant-based, we're talking about food that is unprocessed or minimally processed. So we're talking about an apple or maybe some applesauce as compared to apple juice or Apple Jacks or apple Jolly Ranchers, right? So trying to eat the food looking pretty close to how it looked when you picked it. And when I think of whole food plant-based nutrition, I think of 7 categories, and I learned this from Juliana Heaver, who's an amazing plant-based dietitian, and she thinks about it in 7 categories. And so the first category is vegetable. So these are some vegetables that we grow in the garden, and you can see cruciferous vegetables and greens in the picture, and these are sort of the cornerstone of vegetables, but you got starchy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables and all sorts of colors. Fruits is the second category, and that could be berries like we see here, but also other non-berries like persimmons that you see in the bottom right corner, etc. Legumes, which are the beans, lentils, chickpeas, split peas, and we certainly grow a share of legumes in our garden. And some easy ones to grow would be, and beautiful ones to grow would be like the scarlet runner beans that you see on the left, or some fava beans that you see on the right. We're just harvesting those at this time of year. Whole grains is the next category, and I'd say that this is probably the hardest part to incorporate into a garden. I think if you want to grow your own whole grain, probably the easiest one for many of us would be the corn for making flour corn, cornmeal, etc. This is different than a sweet corn, which is grown and eaten like a vegetable. But flour corn would probably be the easiest. But some people grow their own oats and wheat and rye. It just takes a little bit more space and a little bit more dedication to process it. But a critical aspect of whole food eating. And then there's nuts and seeds, and in the garden for many people, getting seeds from a pumpkin, and they have some pumpkins that are holeless seeds, and so you don't have to um, bite through a hole to get to the inner seed. And then things like sunflower seeds as well. But with more space, you can grow your own, and depending on your climate, of course, but you can grow your own walnuts and almonds and things like that. Herbs and spices, the next category, and that's something that just about anyone can grow, whether you're growing on a balcony or on a windowsill or in a large plot. We've got some rosemary and thyme and uh, sage and stuff in this picture. And then the last group is mushrooms. And depending on where you are and what sort of space you're in, you can grow mushrooms outdoors, or you can grow mushrooms in a little grow kit that you order for 20, 25 bucks online and grow it in your closet. And then just with a little bit of low light, and you see some beautiful oysters and wine cap mushroom, Kingstophoria on the right, for example. And it makes dishes that look sort of like this. So a mixture of all those things. And you can pull from your garden. And if you do it right, and if nature's on your side and you're in a good spot, you can harvest most of the year, if not all year. All right. And so you can say, hey, I'm going to grow things that fit into Joel Furman's G bombs category. And these are the foods that are some of the highest in nutrients, and a lot of folks in the audience will know what that is, but that's greens and beans and onions and mushrooms and berries and seeds and nuts. And If you eat from that every day, you're going to be eating some of the most nutritionally packed foods there are, and you can decide to grow those. Or you can think of Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen and say, okay, I'm going to try to grow as many of these things from the Daily Dozen. Or you can think about the PCRM's nutrition rainbow and say, wow, red produce and orange produce and yellow produce and green produce, they're all giving something slightly different. I'm going to try to grow something from all the colors of the rainbow. And so that's kind of the quick overview on food, on a whole food plant-based diet. And now I'm going to move on to thinking about physical activity and how that relates to gardening. And I think if you had told me, oh, you're going to get a lot of physical activity from gardening, I imagine myself in my 70s maybe puttering around the garden. But it turns out that you can get all sorts of great exercise while you're in the garden. And we know from research that movement helps to decrease chronic illnesses like hypertension and cancer. It helps control blood sugar spikes. And a very important concept with physical activity is the idea of nudges. And this is something that is brought forth through Dan Buettner's work in the blue zones. And when he talks about folks in the blue zones, nudges are a big part about physical activity. And that's the idea of, well, something that's getting us out of our chair, something that's getting us up and getting around multiple times a day is actually really important because it all adds up. So here's a picture of some what's called mosh or corn salad or wheat. It's basically like a little lettuce. And when you think about this, I had to prepare the soil, maybe plant some seeds. Then I go out and I water them, and then I have to go out and weed around them so that they don't have competition. And then I have to go out and pick the slugs and the snails off, and then I have to harvest them and water them. And you can see how it all adds up to basically a lot of movement and calories burned. And organizations like the American Institute for Cancer Research reminds us that it doesn't have to be a quote unquote workout. We just need to get outside and get moving. And exercise helps to reduce colon cancer, for example, which is one of the reasons why the Cancer Institute is recommending this. And it turns out that you don't have to be running a marathon to get benefits from it. Even just doing some sort of physical activity like walking for half an hour a day has been shown to add on average around 3.5 years to our life. And so another reason why the Department of Health and Human Services, which is where I got this infographic from, the CDC basically says, get your 150 minutes a minimum a week of moderate exercise, and that can be from gardening. And this cute little drawing that I didn't do shows that basically you can get a full body workout depending on what you're doing in the garden with whatever tool you're working with. And here I have a worm bin where we throw our kitchen scraps and can close the lid, keep animals out from them, and have a bunch of composting worms in there. But it needs to be turned and aerated, and it can get quite heavy when it's full. And moving compost around the garden and water around the garden, etc., takes a lot of work. And this is a shot from my friend Kim's place in Colorado, Dr. Scheuer, who's one of the docs at Love Life Telehealth, excellent doc. And this is a reminder of her spot here in Salida, Colorado, that you need physical activity to be going year round, and you can grow stuff and stay active in a garden year round, kind of depending on how you set things up. Here's her little geodesic greenhouse that she and her partner built. So moving on to sleep, how in the world can growing an edible garden help with sleep? Well, the first thing is getting out early in the morning. We know that getting sunshine on our retinas will help to reset our daily internal clocks. And one good habit from that many gardeners follow is to try to get out in the morning before it gets hot, walk around the garden, see what's ready to pick, see what got eaten by bugs last night, and kind of keep your eye on everything. And that helps getting out in the morning to get your internal clock reset. Getting exercise helps with sleep, particularly earlier in the day. You can also choose to try to eat more foods with melatonin, like some of these foods in this picture. And there's some nice videos on nutritionfacts.org that Dr. Greger and his team have put together to talk about foods that have melatonin to help with sleep, or foods that have tryptophan, which is a precursor for melatonin that includes beans and potatoes, or even lettuce, which since Roman times has been known to have a sleep-inducing effect. Actually, a randomized study that, again, Dr. Greger talks about is just a quarter teaspoon, which was 1,000 milligrams of ground lettuce seed in a blinded study during pregnancy, showed that that helped with sleep compared to the placebo in a group of pregnant women. So you can, grow more lettuce. But watch out, if you do it too well, you might just suddenly pass out in the garden, perhaps like my wife did here on this day. But at least she's working on her vitamin D. Um, and then, we're also avoiding risky substances, perhaps through gardening by choosing to garden in a way that avoids potentially toxic inputs. So I just took a course, a really great course called Learn Veganic by a wonderful group in Canada and Quebec that you can find online, and I recommend. And you can, while organic agriculture is pretty amazing and does a lot of things better than conventional agriculture, it still can often rely on inputs from factory farms, like ground up feathers and bones and dried up blood and things like that. And if you decided that you wanted to grow completely in a vegan way, you can do that in your own garden. And the produce that you eat is 100% vegan or veganic. And this is just an example of a fertilizer. For example, if you're buying a fertilizer, that there are various types that do sell a vegan mix. And you can avoid pesticides by helping to support your local predators, insect predators. So we've got the praying mantis and ladybugs and dragonflies. This is the concept of integrative pest management. That we try to spread the word about, to say that, hey, we've got good bugs out there that can eat the bad bugs. And a big farm just can't rely on this, or going outside and squishing the aphids with their fingers, or squirting them off with a squirt of water. When you got 1,000 acres of corn, that's just not practical, right? But you can do that in your own garden. And then for people who are saying, let's come up with some alternatives to drinking a glass of wine at night, because they want to cut alcohol out of their diet. I look forward to the fall, where our Zinfandel grapes, we pick late in the year. They're really sweet, and you can blend them or juice them. And then you've got, even better than wine for your health, it's got all the resveratrol and the alcohol, if that's something that you're working on. You could also make funny little mocktails from stuff that you pick in the garden and make things interesting as well, as another alternative. So for positive social connection, I do a lot of gardening by myself, but when I'm lucky, I get to be out there with my wife and my daughter, and the social aspect of that is huge. And then gardeners tend to have gardening friends, like our friends Fred and Nikki, and they have a beautiful plot and love sharing some of their harvests with friends, like these mulberries that were so delicious. Our friend Dr. Bruce, who's also a lifestyle medicine doc, I have no idea how he grows such large vegetables. I'm jealous, but we'll come over for a potluck, share produce from our garden, and talk about what's working and what's not. Or you might have a friend with a big tree with a whole bunch of fallen apples on the ground that are just going to go to waste, and you can then make applesauce, bring it back to them. They feel better, you feel better. You can spend an hour in a community garden, like this great spot near my place, the Larkfield Community Garden, where you can sweat with the pros and learn from them for an hour, and then you might leave with a couple of heads of cabbage. Or this wonderful group called the Community Seed Exchange in Sebastopol, California, where they grow veggies just to collect the seeds so that they can give them away for free. And this is a critically important part about the future of agriculture, that we can grow and keep and trade our own seeds. And then when you think about communities that might be struggling in some ways, Ron Finley, who calls himself the Gangsta Gardener, is a wonderful TEDx that you should check out. And in South Central LA, he's showing how there's all this open spots, all these vacant lots that can be converted to landscape for growing food. He likes to say that gardening is the most therapeutic and defiant thing you can do in the inner city. Plus, you get strawberries. And he says that growing your own food is like printing your own money. And he's done a lot of amazing work down in LA and beyond. Last pillar, just talking about stress management. And people joke that, oh, I'm stressed out in the garden. The aphids are eating the lettuce and the birds are taking the cherries, etc. But there are really some peaceful moments in the garden. And I haven't talked too much about scientific research that's been done in gardening today, but there's definitely research that's going on all these aspects of gardening. But one of them, I mean, they just in a lower economic neighborhood in the UK showed that the just putting a couple of plants in the front yard led to lower cortisol levels. People felt more relaxed and happier, felt closer to nature. Um, Another study out of the Netherlands showed that when you put a group and make them do something stressful, and then you send half the group indoors to read and half the group outdoors to garden, the gardening group had lower cortisol levels and they felt quote unquote fully restored to a good mood, while the readers further deteriorated in their mood. And so while I'm a fan of reading, it seems like to de-stress, maybe getting outside in the garden is even better. And yeah, other studies out of Princeton showing how just growing a garden, especially growing some vegetables, brought about the same emotional well-being as getting walks in and going for bike rides, etc. And certainly there's an entire field called horticultural therapy, where specialists work with folks, sometimes veterans struggling with poor mental health or spinal cord injury patients who one of the main forms of therapy is getting them out into the garden and the restorative benefits of being in nature. And so that's basically my breakdown on how gardening ties in with the core tenets of lifestyle medicine. And just to expand that a bit, I would say that we can't be healthy individually if our planet isn't healthy. And I think a lot of us feel that, you know, planet Earth is suffering for a lot of what we are doing to it. And it's amazing how there are benefits from growing our own food for the greater community, for the whole planet, I'd say. And I think of Vandana Shiva, who's the amazing Indian food activist who has a pretty powerful quote. And she says, industrial farming is the single biggest destructive force on the planet today. And, I'm really thankful for our farmers and the food we have on our shelves. Regardless of how my strawberries do this year, I can go to the store and buy strawberries, and I'm super thankful for that. But, they have big challenges that they have to work with, distribution, for example. You've probably heard that quote that depending on where you are, on average, there might be 1,200 miles from farm to table to get the food onto your table. And so there's a lot of issues with distribution uh, and and making profit for your shareholders. Big ag, that's one of their main requirements, is to make profits. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a focus on maximizing the health for the consumers and preserving nature and environmental stewardship. The focus oftentimes is on other things. And so that's a real big challenge. And so by gardening in our own garden, we can minimize our footprint with, we don't need plastic bags to go pick produce in the produce section. We don't need a tractor to harvest 5 tomatoes. We don't need a 18-wheeler to get food from our backyard to our kitchen. There's all sorts of just local advantages. And Dr. Scott Stoll and others from the Plantrition Project, working with folks like the Rodale Institute and Joel Furman and Ron Weiss and these others, came together and wrote a nice paper called The Power of the Plate, which is available online free. And it really focuses in on how we can focus on regenerative agriculture, and some of that we could do in our own backyards, so that we have healthy soil, healthy food, and therefore healthy people and a healthy planet. And part of how that is helpful in the garden setting is that we can be really really tight with our water, if you will. We live in a very drought-prone area in California, and so we collect a lot of rainwater. We use a whole lot of mulch to minimize the amount of water we need. We use drip irrigation so that we put the water right on the roots. And even with all the things that we grow, I was doing the math, even with all the things that we grow year round, um, we use about a third of the water as the average citizen in our county, and we're already a county that uses less water on average than the rest of the United States. And so, or much of the United States. So there's just different practices that we can do in the garden, which are different than when you drive by a field that's being overhead spray watered at noon for a variety of different reasons in a big, 100-acre field. So that's one of the important resources. And of course, trying to minimize food rate waste by doing things like a worm bin or a compost bin in your own yard is just really amazing because so much of food is wasted, and then in a landfill it makes greenhouse gases, but then you can turn it into black gold with the help of some worms and bacteria and time, and you use that to feed your next season's crop. And I would say another benefit for the planet is that we can grow locally and then save our excesses by freezing or canning or drying. And so that we can eat some delicious stuff that we grew during the summer, right in the middle of winter, and it doesn't have to be shipped from Mexico or Central America, for example. And so just to wrap this part up is just a moment thinking about the future. And while we need to be healthy, we need to assure our own health, and we need a healthy planet. When we're gone, we need a future generation that is paying attention to what really matters. And it can be very disheartening when you see statistics about a lowered life expectancy potentially related to diabetes and obesity epidemics. And we know that our kids are spending less time outside. I think I saw a statistic that maybe about 7 hours of screen time a day in some places, and about 7 minutes of outside time a day. And that's just crazy crazy unbalanced there. And so what we have done, besides grow some peppers and some blueberries, is to grow something really beautiful, which is our daughter, and in our garden, basically. And one of the benefits that we've seen from studies actually is that this can increase veggie consumption. It can decrease food neophobia in a study. And so here we started with our daughter pretty much gardening in utero. She was in the womb here while Mimi is starting her starts. And then she's just kind of been in and around the garden over the years, involved in harvest and watering, and sometimes playing more with the food than actually eating it. But that's important too, to know where it comes from. And what she's really been focused on is just all of the living organisms that are attracted to a place that's not, just a little turf, a little thing of green grass, but really with all the flowers and whatnot, the insects that abound, and walking around the garden and picking berries at dinner as a family, for dessert, that is. It really, I think, brings the next generation closer to nature, hopefully gets them eating a little bit better, hopefully reminds them of the importance of something as basic as, with a little bit of water and sun and soil, a seed can turn into something really great. So that's basically what I had to share for the screen, for the slideshow today.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank
When
you.
you were showing the beans, those were purple beans? I've never seen a purple bean. Purple's my favorite color. What were those?
Those were a type of bean called a scarlet runner bean.
But
And
I didn't know they were purple. They're beautiful.
yeah, they're really, really pretty. And the flowers are bright red, the vines are dark green, and then when you open up the pods, they're this just lovely purple with modeling on them. Really cool.
That is very, very cool. That's hilarious. How long did your wife stay down?
when when she got knocked out. Yeah, I have to go outside and turn her every once in a while so she doesn't get any pressure sores. No,
Oh,
she's
that's hilarious.
it was just a nap, I'm sure.
That is so funny. Well, you said something about some kind of lettuce, a quarter teaspoon for pregnant women. What exactly is that?
So this was a study I found off of nutritionfacts.org, and the study involved a quarter teaspoon of ground lettuce seed, which was I think a thousand
I
milligrams.
don't know what ground lettuce seed is.
I think it's basically lettuce seed that's ground down. So you can buy that as a powder, or I suppose you could buy lettuce seed and grind it up. The study just had people taking that as a supplement, and there was, when you grind something down small and put it in a pill, then you can sort of compare it to a sugar pill or a placebo pill, basically. And it showed that it helped with sleep more than the placebo. The study was done in pregnant women. And women who have been pregnant, and I work with a lot of them, oftentimes sleep is one thing that women struggle with.
That is so interesting. Do you save money when you grow your own food?
It's a great question, and it depends on how you garden. And it depends on what you grow and how you grow. So you can start from seed. And you can start from seed from a seed bank, which you're oftentimes getting it for free. And you can, use you're using your own city water, well water, or rainwater. Um, and you're careful with your inputs, that's very inexpensive. Or you could go outside, or you could go to the garden center and buy a full grown plant and put it in the ground and harvest it, just a couple weeks later. That's less cost efficient. And then there are things at the store that are super inexpensive, or at the farmer's market or whatever, that are super inexpensive. And then there are things that are really expensive, like some really fancy, I don't know, fancy heirloom tomatoes, and you can save lots of money by growing your own of those. So it all depends. You can grow fruit trees from cuttings, or you can grow a fruit tree that you bought as a mature specimen for $100. So it depends on how you do it. But yeah, you can save money.
Wow. How do you stop the critters from eating your stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. And I we struggle with that. And that's just part of nature. Some of the stuff we grow is just going to be food for other beings. And you have to be okay with that. But there are tips and tricks. So we put netting over fruit bushes when they're getting ripe, and that works most of the time. We lost up like 90% of our cherries the other night when something got in there. Um, and we put some wire cages around things because the local possum might be digging around looking for things, or the cat might decide that that's the best litter box ever. And so you just have to, you you see a challenge, you come outside and something you planted yesterday has been torn up, and then you replant it and you put a cage around it and you see how that works. So there are a variety of things that you can do.
So I hear from a lot of people that are vegan, like that, um, about manure, like that's from an animal. And if there's another way to, you know, I mean, I don't think you're hurting an animal by using its poop, but I've heard them say, well, what can you use instead?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, from a gardening standpoint, if, like, say your sister has a couple of chickens that she takes care of and loves, and they're house pets basically, and she wants to give you the manure, that's one thing. But then if you're buying a manure based something or other that's coming from a feed lot where there's 10,000 chickens in a factory, that feels very different to ethical vegans. And one thing that I learned so much from taking that learn veganic course online, that was out of Canada, because they say there are all sorts of options. You can collect the fallen leaves in the fall and let those break down, and you can use that in the garden come spring and summer. um, you can collect your own kitchen scraps and garden wastes and make your own compost. You can do worm composting bins. What I've done this year is I bought a big bag of alfalfa pellets. And so it's basically alfalfa that has been pressed into pellets. There's no fillers. It's organic. And that's high in protein, excuse me, high in nitrogen, building block for protein. And that I've been adding to our own compost, and then just like a basic compost that I bought in bulk from a local place that's just yard trimmings. And that the stuff has been going great. You can do what's called green manure. So instead of manure from an animal, green manure is you're growing a crop purposely to chop it down and to use what you've chopped down as a way to feed your garden. And so people will do that with fava bean type things, clover, alfalfa, or a mix of things. And so all sorts of options to feed your garden in a vegan way if that's something you're working on.
Great, thank you. Jill, who's watching live, would like to know, what are the best plants to grow when you have really limited space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because a lot of folks are working with either a balcony or maybe they have a spot outside, but it's rented space and they don't have permission from the landlord. So a couple of cool things. So I didn't mention, but um, I just passed my final, and I'm a newly minted master gardener through the University of California Extension. And we learned all sorts of things there. I'm not speaking as a master gardener today because those have certain specific guidelines and rules to follow, but I learned so much in that program. And one of the things that they do through the Master Gardener program is bucket gardening. And basically, they take 5-gallon buckets that have been used at a local grocery store, food grade plastic, drill some holes in the bottom, fill it up with potting soil, put a plant in there, and you can grow multiple things in these 5-gallon buckets that aren't that heavy and that you can put on a balcony or that you can put on a deck or on a driveway. And so you can get away with there are smaller varietals of some things. So like they will have a tomato that's genetically smaller, so it works well in pots. They'll have the same thing for a zucchini that instead of getting, 4 feet across, maybe gets 2 feet across. So there are all sorts of things that you can grow in pots. The classic ones that you can grow in containers are things like your herbs, but you can also do, of course, you can do microgreens and you can do sprouting, all sorts of things without hardly any space at all. And so, yeah, I would think about growing in containers with some of the smaller varietals. And if you go into a seed catalog like Territorial Seed or Rare Seed, which is the group out of Missouri and California. If you go to Rare Seeds, all sorts of seed places, you just search for container type plants. Lots of options.
Thank you. So Crafty Nurse Nick says, good morning, Dr. Pierce. Dr. Pierce is my doctor and he's amazing. So thankful to have him on my team.
That is so nice to hear from you, Nick. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching. And I learned gardening from her as well, and so she's my teacher as well.
Well, this is a great segue to tell people about what you do for Love Life Telehealth, because somebody's saying, what is your website? It's not that you have a website necessarily, but there is a link to make an appointment. Maybe you can tell us what states you're licensed to see or to talk to patients in.
Sure, thanks for asking. So I am very lucky to work with a great group of doctors at Love Life Telehealth, and it's love.life/telehealth if you want to find out more about us. But we're a small group of docs that cover pretty much nationwide, between the group of us. And we all focus on lifestyle medicine. And I'm licensed in California, where I live, Texas, where I'm from, and Florida as well, those 3 states. But there are just all the doctors on the team are wonderful. I would recommend any of them, and we cover the nation. And basically, those are 30 or 60-minute appointments, and we take a look at questionnaires beforehand so that the time that we're face to face is really high yield for you. And the hope is that we can work on getting to the root cause of things to help with chronic conditions like cholesterol and diabetes and whatnot. And if you just want to, if you just want to talk about growing vegetables, I could do that too, but it's probably a little bit pricey if you're just talking about carrots. But I'm always happy to talk about gardening as well. And if you join Love Life Telehealth, or at least get on our newsletter, every month I do this year, every month I'm doing a gardening article that ties in health and growing our own food. And you can get on that mailing list as well.
Nice. Thank you. In case people didn't see you on the show before, maybe briefly tell your story about when you became plant-based and why, and if your family's plant-based. People love to hear those kind of things, plus what you eat in a day.
Sure. Yeah, that's always fun to talk about. So I'm from Texas, South Texas, Corpus Christi, actually, and come from a bicultural family. Um, uh, uh, my mom's side is Mexican American, and so we had a rich upbringing with all sorts of different foods, and a very lucky and full of love upbringing from my wonderful parents, and grew up eating an omnivore diet, eating a little bit of everything. And when I was a senior in college, I happened to watch some HBO special on factory farms, and that blew my mind because I had really no idea that that was where so much of my food was coming from. And so I switched to a vegetarian diet in 2000. That was that year. And uh, for those reasons, but I didn't really know that there were any health reasons about it. It was just for sort of an ethical reason that I switched at that point. And then the more I learned about it, particularly when I learned about lifestyle medicine, and was with my wife at this point, years and years later, that actually going as close to a whole food plant-based diet, as close to a vegan diet as possible, a healthy vegan diet, right? Not a vegan diet with a lot of processed foods in, is actually not only good for the animal, but it's good for our health, it's good for the community's health, and it's good for the planet's health. And it's just like, well, how amazing is it that all that lines up, that with the same diet, it helps so many on so many different levels. And so that's sort of my story for switching to a whole food plant-based diet. And I felt a whole lot better since switching. I'm not a randomized controlled trial, but my seasonal allergies went away when I stopped dairy and started eating more like a more anti-inflammatory diet. My hand arthritis that I was already getting went away as I switched to eating and living this kind of a lifestyle. And um, uh, my uh, my belly fat that had just been a part of me for decades has gotten better as I get older. And I think it's kind of, for many of us, it seems kind of weird that we get trimmer and feel better as we get older. That's not a concept that many of us knew as children. We just thought like the older we get, the slower and more painful and heavier we're going to get. But I'm very thankful that as I've made these switches and really put a focus on um, my own health overall, that I have been seeing benefits in multiple areas. Sorry if
Nice.
you're catching the noise next door, where there's a little construction work at my neighbor's yard.
I can't even hear it.
Okay,
Janet,
great.
Janet would like to know, will you ever write a book on gardening?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Well, uh, come to think of it, I have the honor to be working with Scott Stoll and the others at the Plantation Project to be coming up with a gardening for health quick start guide. And so the hope is that this is going to be, as far as I'm aware, this is going to be a nice, colorful, printed little handbook, similar to some of their other guides that they've put forth. And yeah, if that goes well, maybe someday maybe there'll be a book that comes out of it.
Nice. People love to know what you eat in a day, and I'm curious when you answer that, how much of it is from your garden?
Oh yeah. So because, not that I recommend this sort of gardening to everybody, but because we're sort of crazy gardeners and we have put something edible in almost every square foot of our life and house around here, we eat from our garden multiple times every day, 12 months of the year, unless we're out of town or something. Um, in the morning, I'm almost always a oatmeal breakfast kind of guy. And I learned from my friend Fred that you can actually put everything in the bowl and just pour recently boiled water from the kettle on top of it, and that's a quick and easy way to do it. So that's how I do my oats 90% of the time. And when things are in season, I'll just be picking things from outside in the garden to go with breakfast. Um, and then lunch is usually leftovers from the nights before, and that's usually basically our go-to is usually a whole grain, a green, a legume in various ways. And so what we pick with a really steady supply is greens. No matter where you live, there's a way that you're growing your own greens. Our main green crop happens to be purple tree collards that do really well in our neck of the woods, but also kale and chard and stuff. And so we've got it so that things just kind of self-seed, and you do replant some things, but we are just eating veggies from the garden year round. And then fruit, I'm a big fruit grower where it comes to berry bushes to fruit trees, and I keep them small. I have actually a little video if we end up having time, or maybe the
Yeah,
next time we
I
do
mean,
the
please, I
show.
mean, go ahead. It'd be fine if you'd like to show
Okay.
it.
In the video, you'll see that I keep a lot of our trees and bushes either in pots or on the driveway or trimmed down, doing some summer pruning, so that instead of just having one tree that gives us 1,000 apples, but then no room for anything else, I've got a bunch of smaller trees so that we can start harvesting in May, and we harvest all the way till about um, March the following year, if you think between berries and stone fruit and citrus. And part of that is just that we live in a climate in California that it doesn't get 20 below like it will in Minnesota. So that's just climate wise. But then also part of it is um, choosing a variety of, say, apples. So one ripens early, one ripens mid-season, one ripens late season. And so these are some tricks that you can do to spread your harvest year round. So should we maybe watch the little silly
Yeah,
video
I'd
I
love
put
to
together?
watch. I'd
Okay.
love to.
It's my first attempt at making a YouTube presentable garden tour here. So let me get that set. All right. Here we go. Okay, well, we've been talking a lot about the garden. Let's go outside and take a tour, see for ourselves. All right, here we go. All right, looks like Lilu's coming with us too. All right, so this was basically all driveway. And what we did is we made some holes in the ground, as you can see down here, with a cement saw, and planted some citrus. And we also built some boxes like this one and planted some avocados, which generally don't actually do so well here in Northern California. And then we also did a bunch of pots. And we've got them all on drip irrigation, save water. Um, but basically, we just tried to say, look, this is a great sunny space. Let's not waste it just to have a place to put a car. I mean, who needs a driveway? So we put some plants there. So we got things crawling up the fence. That was a Arctic kiwi back there. We got some fun purple tree collards here growing out of a raised bed here that we got protected from birds and squirrels and cats and all that stuff. We got blueberries and strawberries. You know, blueberries love that acidic soil, and you can really control the soil there if you keep them in a pot. But yeah, we got to mix some fun things like some figs and some mulberries, a banana, it hasn't given us any bananas yet, but we're gonna keep trying. Yeah, and so just really full of sun. So sun-loving, heat-loving plants like this little miniature peach, blueberries, etc. There's a great peach here that's called O. Henry, yellow, beautifully tasting, just so delicious. Recommend it if you folks have a spot for an O. Henry peach. Yeah, so just some more things here. Growing in little raised beds. We've got a beautiful little zucchini growing. Got a bee box. My wife manages the bees. She's our local beekeeper, part of the beekeeping society. You know, we got to protect our pollinators, and they certainly help us out all the time. All right, so we got a grape growing up here. Here's our cherry growing, and a couple cherries growing in big pots. Keeps them dwarfed and still producing cherries. We're pretty sad. 2 nights ago, this one was raided by, I think, a bird. Oh man, it just went to town, but that's okay. We got other things growing. So this area was just a little grassy spot that we've been converting, throwing some. Here's a plum, apple with an orchard ladder next to it, and then just let kind of things go wild here. You know, we've got a lot of fennel, and fennel is a great habitat for caterpillars. And so here is caterpillar that's going to be a butterfly soon. Oh, yeah, looks like it's just getting close. And over here, we got another caterpillar. Yeah, right there. So just real wild, mixed in with trying to get some fruit. Here's pluot. This area is real nice. It gets morning sun, and it's great for berries that don't need necessarily bacon sun all day long. Raspberries, and here's a yusta berry. They're not ripe yet, but they're on their way. And here's some red currants. These things are delicious. More popular in Europe than they are in the United States, I think. But man, are they good? And they don't need a ton of. They don't need a ton of sun. Here we've got a great Meyer lemon. You know, sweeter than a typical lemon, probably mixed with an orange parentage a long time ago. But anybody want lemons? Get a Meyer lemon, and then have some patience. But here's it's a cement area that we put some more heat-loving plants. This is a Mexican cream guava. Some other fun things. This is a weeping Santa Rosa plum and a Thompson grape back there. You know, grapes would just seem like they'll just grow forever and ever. So plant one and just have fun seeing where it goes. Here we are on the south side of the garage. It gets baked over here. So we put some pots with miniature peach and apricot, among others. And then this is a nice little view of what was a carport, but we said, again, who needs space for the cars? We're just going to turn that into a little greenhouse. And here we are. We've got a little mini greenhouse with some things that might struggle a little bit in our cold and wet winters. But this is a white sapote, and this is a lemon strawberry guava. I got some little fruitlets there. A mountain papaya called a babaco, another guava, and some fun things like mango. I think we even got, yeah. He's trying. Got a little some baby mangoes. Cross your fingers for me. Yeah. Just having fun in here, and it's a nice little spot to to get out on a rainy day, get out of the weather, and hope for avocados, which may or may not do it. That's all right. Here's some of our water catchment. We've got this tucked in the garage, but we have a storage area for water, and a lot of these buckets that used to be in the like olive or garlic trade, and then you can buy them upcycled at your local store. And we've got a whole bunch of these throughout the property. That just allows us to capture a lot of water. Because with our Mediterranean climate, it rains like crazy over the winter, and then it almost doesn't rain at all for the rest of the year. So we got to store the water up whenever we can. And then this is just the last little area where we've got a mixture again of raised beds and uh, vines and trees growing, um, and we always try to have flowers for the pollinators and um, compost bins to make more of that what they call black gold. You know, uh, don't throw your kitchen scraps away. Turn them into compost, then put them in your garden. So yeah, this was a tour here of our little facility, our little spot of heaven, and see you soon.
That was hilarious. Who needs a driveway? I guess people that have a car to park in one.
Yeah, I guess that. But yeah, we've sort of run out of space for anything other than plants when
That's
you get out of.
funny. Well, Serenity would like to know your address because she would like to move in. And Jimmy, this is in California. He's in Santa Rosa, not too far from True North. And
That's
you had
right.
mentioned, I think when you showed the cherry that a bird probably got it. And I was wondering, I don't have a garden, but we do intentionally feed a lot of birds. We have bird baths, and I'm looking at them now, bird feeders. We
Hmm.
feed the ground birds, the songbirds, the hummingbirds. And I'm curious, if you were to intentionally feed them like that, would they still go after the stuff in the garden?
That's a good question, AJ. I mean, birds are a mixed bag. I mean, they're part of nature. They're just like we are. They have a right to be here. They certainly eat a lot of bad bugs and critters that we don't want in our garden. They're beautiful. We love seeing. We've had scrub jays in the blue jay family. Scrub jays like raising their young in a nest in our garden and stuff like that. That's awesome. I don't love it so much when you catch them on the, blueberry bush eating the blueberries. So we sometimes set out bird feeders for them. And I haven't had enough experience to know if that is a good diversionary tactic in our yard. But yeah, feed the birds and just get good at keeping your produce away from them and so that they can eat something else.
We love them. It's just we have this hawk that comes and terrorizes them, and we've got to figure out a solution to that. Oh, they're so pretty. I wish you could see them with the red and the yellow on their chest. We're
That's
thinking of putting in more trees closer so that they have a place to go safely, but the trees here are not mature enough yet for them to hide.
I hear you. My folks are the same way in their little place in North Texas. They have bird feeder and bird bath, and they struggle a bit with the hawk and the squirrels. But when the birds are loving the food in the bird bath, it's just really nice to watch. You can feel your blood pressure come down.
No, I mean, that's why I don't want to move because I might not have a window right by I mean, I just literally, they come like twice a day, and it's just, they're adorable. I just think they're so precious. Okay, on to the questions. Gina says, what was that interesting brown lettuce in the presentation?
It's a good question. So, um, I don't remember for sure, but oftentimes when we are buying lettuce, we're getting like the red varietals that tend to, the idea of trying to buy red or blue or purple to get the extra anthocyanins, the extra these phytochemicals that are good for us, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer type stuff. So it would have been something in the red lettuce family, but I don't remember the exact one that time.
Okay. It was right when I think you said about the pregnant women and the seed. I think that's what I remember when it occurred.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Jill would like to know where she can purchase natural fertilizer for container gardening.
Yeah. So I wonder where was that Joel, where Joel lives?
Jill.
Jill, where Jill lives. But a so it's tough to find potting soil if you're trying to grow completely animal input free, like veganic. It's hard to find that. You can um try your best to make your own, or you can find one that just seems to be the least harmful. Like I found potting soil at our local big box store, which is called Friedman's, which is similar to like a Lowe's, but more local. Um, and it's sourced locally in the Northwest. And one of them, the only animal input it had was like bat guano or something. And to me, that feels better than something that's got like a bunch of chicken manure from a CAFO, from a factory farm. But that's just a personal decision. As far as adding fertilizer, that one brand that I don't have any relationship with, but that one brand that was in the photo, I think was called Down to Earth. And they have some of these products that are the vegan formulas. But if you just do a search online, I think also maybe Dr. Earth has another brand. But yeah, there'll be some online that you can have delivered to your house, perhaps.
Thanks. And the question from Mish is if you buy herbs or fruit trees from garden centers, for example, is it wise to find out what seeds they used originally?
So, um, it's a good question that has a nuanced answer that I certainly don't have all the answers for. But I would say that if you're considering, let's just consider plants, growing your own vegetables. One of the best places to get seed or a start is something that was coming from plants and seeds that were grown very locally. Because the idea is if you grow the same lettuce for 5 or 10 generations in your city, it's going to become more, and you're picking the best plant to keep that seed for the next year. You are going to be genetically selecting, like Darwin or whatever, for the healthiest plants that you can grow in your town. When you go to a typical seed place, um, Johnny's Seeds is a seems like a good company. It's a big company though, and so the seed for a watermelon might do really well grown in Missouri or in Texas, but have no chance in Rhode Island where the growing season is much shorter. And so when you're buying the actual seed or even a young plant, what we call a start, it's nice to look for little buzzwords or little information in the tag that says in trials did well with cold nights during the summer. Like I'm trying a watermelon that was grown in a place that has cold nights like we do, and to increase the chance that it'll do something. So from that aspect, as locally as possible is cool. If I'm buying a new fruit tree, which we often get from bare roots, which the dormant, small, young trees, more economical, better environmentally because they're lighter when they're being shipped. Those tend to come from areas close by. Um, uh, that probably not being shipped from all across the country to your house. But sometimes, yes, like that mango, which is a total experiment. Like mangoes do not grow in Santa Rosa unless are treating it like the intensive care unit and adding, heat and protecting it from frost and all this kind of stuff. I got that from a nursery in Florida. And it would be great if someone was growing mangoes locally and I could have gotten that tree from them, but it's just not a thing. So in general, try to grow stuff from local sources. I guess if this is answering your question, that's at least how I'm thinking about it.
Thank you. And Gina would like to know what are your favorite kitchen tools, dehydrator, Instant Pot?
Wow. Well, I had an Instant Pot for a very long time and I loved it. And I think I probably got it um, in part because of Chef AJ, or at least some of my friends and who were supporting it. And then I opened up that recipe book, and there are recipes from Chef AJ and Jill the Veggie Queen, all this cool stuff, local folks. Um, and we used it for a long time, and then it broke, and then I thought, darn it, let's just do without it for a little bit, and then we haven't gone back. So we now just cook with either cast iron skillets or ceramic type things like Crusette or that kind of thing. That's what we do. Or I guess we have a stainless steel pot. So those are the three pots that we would most likely use. Um, I'm a fan of those silicone baking mats, or like a cookie baking mat or a silicone muffin mat.
Love
Silpat
those.
is one of
Yep.
the brands. And that's just been a game changer because I'm not buying the paper for like muffins. And I try to make these healthy muffins where I'm using whole grains and flaxseed and oil free and dairy free, of course. And I make that on a fairly regular basis. And so I love those. And it sounds like AJ is a big fan as well. It's so nice. They clean up easy. They don't stick. And so that's one of the little gadgets, I guess. Um, we recently upgraded to a fancy blender. We just had a regular blender for a decade, and that worked fine. But then we finally got a Vitamix, so we're part of the group now. We know the secret handshake and all that stuff. And I love the all the stuff that AJ and Nikki Davis from Love Life Telehealth does with their air fryer, but we don't have one. We haven't decided to give up what little counter space we have left to that at the moment. So um, we're doing without that. But yeah, pretty basic stuff, I guess, in the kitchen. Uh, Nothing too fancy.
Thanks. So, Moni says she struggles with aphids in the kale every year. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. Aphids, the little gnat looking things, and they can be black or green or white. There are all sorts of aphids out there, and they do their damage by sucking the juices from a plant, particularly younger plants that are more tender. And then they end up having this symbiotic relationship with ants, where ants will take up the sweet secretions that the aphids put out and use that for food. And the ants will therefore protect the aphids from natural predators. Um, and then aphids will, as they go from plant to plant, can pass plant viruses and stuff like that. So they're a menace. um, a couple things. If you see ants and aphids on the same plant, trying to control the ants will help with your aphid problem. Trying to control the aphids will help with your ant problem. Um, for aphids, we don't use insecticides around the garden. Rarely I will use like an organic insecticide like a neem or a soap-based something or other, or a citric acid-based something or other, or maybe a mineral oil. So just like the organic sprays is typically what I will use in some spot areas. And part of that is I don't really love eating produce that's been sprayed with something. But then two is that I think it's just going to be better on the beneficial insects. So keeping a minimally sprayed garden will help the ladybugs come. So in our area, it's the ladybugs, but particularly something called a California soldier beetle that eats a lot of aphids. So we try to support those populations by not spraying. Um, if you don't have a huge garden and just tons and tons of aphids everywhere, going out and squishing them with your fingers, or spraying them with a jet spray of water. I have heard a researcher whose work was on aphids, I believe. It was he either focused on brassica plants or on aphids themselves. He said that squishing the aphids actually released a chemical, a pheromone that the predators for aphids can sense and will draw them to them. So I don't mind, even though I'm I do believe in I do believe in every animal has a right to live. I sometimes make exceptions for things that aphids and other similar insects in the garden. Um, but if you don't necessarily want to kill them, you could also shake them off or spray them off with water. But those are some approaches, I think.
Thank you. Joyce says, I have fruit trees in containers. Do you find they do okay in containers, and do I need to feed them?
Yeah, so fruit trees and containers are tricky. What I do, because you can see we've got a bunch. There are a couple things. You can pick a variety that's a genetic dwarf, so it's got a root stock. Most fruit trees are two actual different plants. The root stock, which is controls how vigorous the plant grows and how resistant it is to a bunch of diseases. And then close to the bottom, close to the soil level, uh, there's another type of peach, for example, that's been grafted onto it that is really good fruit producing. So you have the benefit of one kind of peach that has great roots, and you have this other peach that has great fruit, and they've been grafted in the store or in the nursery and the farm where they were grown before they got to your house. So you want to grab one that has a rootstock that keeps it small. That's one thing that you can do. I haven't done that all the time. The cherries that you saw were not on particularly dwarfed rootstocks, but just being in a pot will help dwarf it. But over time, the roots will be like, I'm not happy. I've run out of room. I've run out of soil. Um, you either need to cut a hole in the bottom of the pot and put it on the soil so that it can keep growing down into your soil. Um, or you need to take it out of the pot, cut some of the roots off, add some more potting soil, compost and stuff, and then put it back in that same pot. But fertilizing with something is often important for these trees that normally might have a root span of 30 feet, but you're keeping it in a 15-gallon pot. And so I'm trying those alfalfa pellets, which break down pretty quickly. You can also soak them and then water those in. That's a good source of nitrogen and some other um, compounds, nutrients, and whatnot. But you can also buy a liquid fertilizer. There are organic ones. Those tend to be things like pretty stinky fish meal and stuff like that. But you can get kelp, liquid kelp stuff, or powdered stuff that you just add to water and pour that in. So there are various ways that you can feed, but yes, some sort of feed for container trees particularly, because they'll just eventually just run out of nutrients in that little pot. If you're if you're using something that you're planting every year, like a lettuce that then next year is going to be a tomato, then next year is going to be something else, you're adding new soil when you plant it. It's a little bit less important that to be fertilizing it, but when you have that same soil in that pot for 5 years, you're just running out of nutrients.
Thanks so much. And there's a question about zucchini. Somebody asked if where did it go? I saw that zucchini. Ah, yes. Gina says, do you grow zucchini and do you use the flowers?
Um, we
Mhm.
do grow zucchini, and zucchini is the plant that they joke about, that your neighbor is growing zucchini because you find zucchini on your front porch dropped off in the middle of the night because theirs is growing so vigorous that they are finding people to give it away to, which is a great community aspect of gardening, right? But so we do grow zucchini, and some years it's a bust, and we just get very few, and it's embarrassing, and we don't talk about it in front of thousands of people like I'm doing right now. Or other years it's all bang, and we get lots of zucchini, and we use it. I typically will make kind of a curry-based recipe, turmeric and cumin and mustard seed and lemon, and a couple other things. That goes really well over brown rice. Um, uh, I will often put it in pasta sauces, and then put it in stews and just have it like a stir fry and things like that. Water saute or whatnot. Um, the flowers, the zucchini plants produce male and female flowers. Um, Oftentimes many more male flowers than are needed. You can harvest those, and traditionally it's like a batter and fry thing. I think I've tried to cook them once or twice, and it was not worth the effort or what I got out of it. And it's probably because I'm doing it wrong. So I'm not a zucchini flower harvester and eater, but some cultures, particularly, I think I think in Italian culture and maybe and certainly in some Southeast Asian cultures, that's just a very common thing where I'm sure they do it very nicely. But I have not. AJ, have you ever tried to cook zucchini flowers or other squash
I
flowers?
haven't, but I do love zucchini. It's one of my favorites. So I love it when people leave oodles of zucchini on my doorstep because then I can make oodles of zoodles.
Ah, yes, zoodles, right? The zucchini noodles.
Yeah, those are fun to make. I just got an electric spiralizer, so that's
Ooh.
cool. That was a lot. I'll show it one day.
Okay.
Uh, Jill says, where can I purchase natural fertilizer for container gardening?
I think that we addressed that one, and
Oh, okay,
I'm
sorry.
glad you bring it up. I will add one thing to it is that um, you can also, if you're making your own compost, or if you're using um, yeah, a worm compost, all those things you can add as fertilizer to your pots as well.
Perfect. And there's another question. What do you think of a raw food diet for humans?
Okay. Well, so I'm not an expert at this. I think of Rick and Karen Dina, who are
Yeah.
friends with AJ as well, and they live not far from us. And great people, very smart and dedicated to the raw food movement. The person who asked this question probably knows of them as well. But if not, please check out Rick and Karen Dina. And they're my source for going to, if I have a patient who, would come to me and say, help me maximize my raw food diet, I would either refer them to Rick and Karen, or I would ask Rick and Karen for help. I think there are lots of benefits of eating raw, and I think many of us don't eat enough raw foods. I personally really enjoy cooked food, and the majority of my food is cooked. But there are lots of nutrients to get from raw food. My buddy John Kohler from Growing Your Greens, if you watch him on YouTube, is a fascinating, smart, and super great guy. And the majority of his diet is raw. And he does a lot of juicing, and innovative ways to use a lot of produce which he grows. He's an amazing gardener. So uh, I guess I would say lots of benefits to eating raw, lots of benefits to eating cooked. My general approach is to recommending a mixture of the two, but there are certainly healthy ways to be raw.
Yeah, absolutely. Serenity would like to know how much time every day do you have to spend maintaining your garden?
Serenity, that's a great question. And I think for folks who are deciding, oh, I want to try gardening, but I'm worried about how much time I'm going to put into it, there's ways to garden in a very time economical way where you're just like, look, I work full time. I only have time for a couple things. So there's tips and tricks where you like attach a little timer to your hose, and it will just water for you. So you don't have to water. You grow something that's lower maintenance, like, oh, I don't know, like we'll pick a I've talked a lot about blueberries, but like you put a blueberry in a pot and it doesn't have very much maintenance. Um, Doing microgreens, other things that you have in your kitchen counter, so you don't even have to go outside if you don't have the time to that day. So there are ways to do it economically. I have time economically. I have not done that in many ways. Yes, I have drip irrigation. Yes, I use mulch so I don't have to weed as much, and I have plenty of bushes and trees that don't require the same amount of work as some of these annuals. But I appreciate being in the garden. So I try to get in the garden every day. And a and a bad day would be where I only have 30 minutes or an hour in the garden. And a good day is when I could spend, 5 hours in the garden. Um, we've created such a crazy situation at our house that I could work for 4 hours a day every day and I would still have more stuff to do. And that's just the garden that we've created. And I can look at it like, oh my gosh, I've created this monster that requires so much time. I don't have to spend that much time in it. And the time I do spend on it, it's sort of like I've gone to the gym. And at the end, instead of just having dirty gym clothes, I've got like a bushel of tomatoes. And so uh, I enjoy spending as much time out in the garden as possible. So, but just on average, I guess I would probably, it depends on how, if I'm working from home or if I'm commuting to labor and delivery. But I do try to spend a solid hour or two every single day if I can.
Yeah, nice. All right. This is a question from Cardote. Is there plenty of nitrogen in organic soil? Dr. Bryan had concerns about the lack of nitrogen in organic beets and greens compared to commercial.
Hmm. I'm not sure who Dr. Bryan is.
I think Nathan Bryant. I think
Nathan,
the guy that talks about nitric oxide a lot.
okay. Um, I've heard a little bit about that and I've not delved into it. I think that there are many things that determine the nutrient composition of a plant. Some of it is the soil. A lot of it is also the varietal. And so, for example, you could have amazing, excellent soil and a head of green lettuce, and you could have so-so soil and a head of deep red lettuce, and you're probably going to have more of certain compounds. You're certainly going to have more like antioxidants, anthocyanins with the dark red lettuce. That's just a nature of the variety, the nature of the genes. I think how much soil affects the nutrient compound of our plants. You see a variety of outcomes in studies. Some of them show higher antioxidants, higher phytochemicals in organically grown vegetables, but maybe the same amount of minerals or maybe better minerals in a conventionally grown. I think there is a variety in the outcome of studies. I am not aware of enough definitive evidence that would make me say, okay, for this type of plant, like a beet, I'm going to buy those conventional, and for this type of plant, I'm going to buy those organic. That evidence might be out there. I'm not aware of it personally. I just like growing and eating organically whenever possible because in general it tends to be better for the environment and better for the farm workers as well. And in my own garden, I the environment that we have created from a this type of growing is pretty, it seems pretty healthy. And I just eat a variety of foods. And so even if my beets, for example, are maybe not as protein rich as a beet that was grown in a conventional way, my diet's not 100% beets. I'm getting such variety that it probably in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter. But it's a really interesting question that's worth more. I bet you John Kohler from Growing Your Greens has an answer for that. You could check out his videos.
Right.
But thank you for that question.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pierce. And where can people find you?
Hmm. So probably the best way for information about patient care is that love.life/telehealth. And if you just want to see more photos of the garden and sort of my thoughts of how to grow some things or just fun pictures of stuff that we've harvested, my Instagram account is where I put those, and that should be in the show notes. But that I believe is Dr. Jeff Pierce at Dr. Jeff Pierce. Yeah.
It absolutely is. Thanks so much, Dr. Pierce.
Okay, it's my pleasure. Always enjoy spending time with you, AJ. I hope you have a great day, and everyone who tuned in, thank you for being here today.
Will you be at the Plantrician Conference in September again?
I will. I will. I'm looking forward to it.
I will see you then in person.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
great. Okay.
And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow for another great show at 9 a.m. Pacific. We have Chef Del Srove, and he is literally going to be making my favorite recipe of his. It is a polenta pizza with an oil-free pesto and potatoes. It will blow your mind. Take care, everyone. Have a great